sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
Baseball fans, it's a tough day as we dive into the story of Brian Matusz, a former MLB pitcher who recently passed away way too young, just 37 years old. We're going to be using a Bleacher Nation article and some tweets from MLB and the Baltimore Orioles to kind of go deeper than just the headlines and try to understand why Matusz's name still means something to Cubs fans even years later.
It's always a sad thing, when we lose somebody from the baseball world, especially a guy with so much potential.
And Matusz, he really did have that potential. Right from the start, drafted 4th overall back in 2008. A draft position that high, you're instantly on everyone's radar. There's just so much excitement around a young player like that.
Oh, yeah. Back then, the 4th pick, it was almost a sure thing. You were headed to the majors.
Yeah.
The Orioles, they were rebuilding at the time, and they had a lot of hope riding on Matusz to be like a key part of their future.
He was seen as that future star, the potential face of the franchise.
Yeah.
What was it that made him such a highly touted prospect?
Well, Matusz was really known for his slider. It was just devastating, really messed hitters up early in his career. And he had a great fastball, too. Scouts were projecting him as like a top-of-the-rotation starter.
He spent most of his 8 seasons with the Orioles, so he became a familiar face in the clubhouse and in the community.
And, his impact went way beyond just the field.
Yeah.
The Orioles, they tweeted about how dedicated he was to the community. And it really sounds like he made a real difference in people's lives off the field.
It's easy to get caught up in the stats and the wins and losses, but the tweets, they really show you the human side of Matusz, the person behind the uniform.
Absolutely. We got to remember, these athletes, they're real people. They have lives and connections that go way beyond baseball.
Speaking of connections, let's talk about Matusz's time with the Chicago Cubs. It wasn't a long time, but as we'll see, it left a mark. This was in 2016, which was a pretty big year for the Cubs, to say the least.
Oh, yeah, that Cubs team, they were on fire. The year they finally broke the curse and won the World Series. That's important to keep in mind as we talk about Matusz. He wasn't a main player in their championship run, but he was part of a game that many Cubs fans will never forget.
And that's where that Bleacher Nation article comes in. It really focuses on that game, July 27, 2016, against the Cincinnati Reds.
So the Cubs, they got Matusz that year. They were looking for a veteran for the bullpen, and he ended up starting that game against the Reds. Now, it didn't go that well for him personally. He had to leave early. But the game itself, that's when things got interesting.
The article called it a legendary game, a real back-and-forth battle with a crazy comeback.
There were some iconic moments, like Travis Wood catching that ball in left field, a pitcher making a game-saving catch in the outfield.
Wait, a pitcher making a catch out in left field? That place must have been going crazy.
It was. It showed you anything could happen in that game.
And then on top of that, John Lester, also a pitcher, ends up getting a walk-off to win it for the Cubs.
Yes. It was incredible. And that Bleacher Nation article, it really captures how much that game meant to Cubs fans. You got to remember, they were coming off of like 100 years without a World Series. So the energy that season was unbelievable. Every win felt huge.
So even though Matusz didn't pitch much in that game, his presence on the mound at the start somehow ties him to this iconic moment in Cubs history. And sadly, that game also marked the end of Matusz's MLB career, according to the article.
Yeah, it's a poignant reminder that even the most promising careers, they can be over in a flash, especially in a sport as tough on the body as baseball is. It really does make you think about all the ups and downs these guys go through, the challenges they face even when they're living their dream.
It does, and it reminds you that their journey is just as uncertain as anyone else's. There's so much focus on the highlights, the big moments, but there's a whole human story behind it all, one that often has setbacks, along with the victories.
Exactly. And for Matusz, it's almost like him having to leave that game early on July 27th. It made the rest of it, the Cubs come back even more dramatic. The stakes felt higher somehow.
Yeah, it's bittersweet, isn't it? Being remembered for a game where you didn't even really factor into the outcome in the end. Yet it feels kind of fitting in a way, given how unpredictable baseball can be. A single game can just take on a life of its own.
That's what's so great about this sport. Individual achievements become part of a bigger story, a collective narrative.
And for Cubs fans, that July 27th game, it became a symbol of that whole magical season, the never-give-up attitude, the crazy comebacks, the joy of watching their team beat the odds.
The Bleacher Nation article even mentions how some Cubs fans remember Matusz as like a good luck charm. They say every time he started a game, they knew something exciting was going to happen.
Wow, that's interesting. Talk about a unique legacy. It's not just about Matuz's stats or awards. It's about how his story intersects with this bigger narrative, a moment that means so much to a whole fan base.
It reminds us that even little things that seem insignificant can become part of a team's history. Those players who don't make the headlines, they can still leave a lasting impact.
And in a way, it makes Matusz's story even more touching. He becomes a symbol of those unsung heroes, the players who work hard even when they're not in the spotlight.
And speaking of unsung heroes, we can't forget about the impact man has had on the Baltimore community. Remember those tweets from the Orioles? They talked about his work with the Casey Cares Foundation, which helps kids with serious illnesses and their families.
Oh yeah, I'd like to hear more about that. Did they give any specifics?
Well, there's one tweet that really stood out. It says, "Brian was always willing to go above and beyond to make a sick kid smile. His kindness and compassion will be missed so much."
That's powerful. It's clear that Matusz had a positive impact on so many lives, both in the game and in the community. That's a legacy that goes way beyond any statistic.
It really shows you the dedication and perseverance it takes to chase your dreams even when things get tough. And reading those tweets from MLB and the Orioles, you can tell Matusz was respected all throughout baseball.
Yeah, it really shows you, how someone can touch so many lives for the better on and off the field. And, on that note, I think we should take a moment to send our condolences to Brian Matusz's family and friends. Losing someone so young, it's just never easy.
It's not. It really puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
Makes you realize how precious life is, especially for these athletes whose careers are so demanding on their bodies and often so short.
It makes you appreciate every moment they give us, the memories they create, even the ones that might seem small at the time.
That's right. And it kind of brings us to a thought for you to think about. What's a game or a moment from your favorite team that maybe wasn't a big deal at the time, but it stuck with you? Something that didn't make the highlight reels, but still resonates with you for some reason.
Yeah, what was it about that moment that grabbed your attention? Why has it stayed with you all this time?
And how do those smaller moments, the ones that don't necessarily change a whole season or define a franchise, how do they become part of your team's history?
It's something to really think about. And maybe it helps us understand, players like Brian Matusz, who might not have been superstars, but still left a mark on the game and on the people who loved it.
So as we remember Brian Matusz, let's also take a moment to appreciate just how amazing and fragile this game we love is, and how it brings us all together through these shared experiences and memories.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.